G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video on something that is commonly mentioned but rarely explained, and that is rifle barrel crowns. It's mentioned regularly in the fashion of how important it is to not damage it, how important it is to look after it, but I don't think it's, like I said, explained very commonly as to what that importance is all about, what we're actually talking about. Yes, we want it to be looked after. We don't want to damage it in any form, and they are prone to being damaged by either misuse, by banging into the end of it and damaging it on the end there, by the cleaning it with the wrong equipment, pulling jags back through. You put a jag through a rifle and then pull it back out, and clunk goes back on, touches it. And there's people who don't think it matters, brass and steel and all that sort of stuff, the softer brass and the harder steel. It still is the most common, well, one of the most common inaccuracy things that a gunsmith will run into as a damaged crown. So that conversation's been through a lot, and I could go deeper into it, but this video is about what's actually going on with crowns. What is the deal there? And I suppose there's a couple of things, with lots of finer details to go, there's a couple of things to understand about a crown. It is the last place that the bullet or the projectile and the barrel have in common. Through the process, that's the last place that where the projectile is released. So it is, for want of a better way to describe it, it is the pitcher's release on a ball. It is as important as that. Now, to understand in simple fashion of what we're talking about release is that a projectile, as it's fired down a barrel, it starts off by getting the rifling cut into it. It starts off at 0 RPM, then it goes 0 speed and RPM, and then it accelerates very rapidly. It's accelerating. So as it cuts into the rifling, it's going, it's traveling faster and it's building an RPM. As it goes faster, it spins faster. By the end of the barrel, it still has pressure. It still has, the lands are pushing on it, the gas is pushing on it, and it still is rubbing on the barrel. So the friction is still there, the force is still there, and the drive is still there in the way of rotating it. So as you can imagine, what you want, if you were to take something like when you're throwing something, if you drag a finger off that ball or that rock or whatever it is as you throw it, you may be planning on doing that side of things, but if you're after the most accurate throw, if you're trying to release a dart the most accurate, you want to release it as evenly as possible. Don't know if that's the best analogy, but if you can imagine a projectile forcing down a barrel and it's being gripped evenly around the outside edge, you can imagine that if you take one piece of that grip off, where right at that last instant one bit lets go first and then the others let go, it's going to then be an uneven release. Now, whether that causes it to steer off in one direction or that causes a loss of stability, because your projectile is going through a huge thing right then. It is changing, it is transitioning from the friction of the barrel, the force of the gases, into, it's basically simply inertia travel. It has to then deal with air, and it has to deal with a sonic burn. It's happening right there. There's a crack happening right there. It's hitting the air right there. It's releasing. There's a lot going on at that muzzle. So the best we can do to make it the most accurate we can is make sure that physical release is even as possible, so that then it is going out into that new strange world in as even as possible state. So that's the simple thing of the physical release. The next bit, and I suppose that this gets into different styles of bullets and things, but or projectiles, boat tails and flat bases and that sort of stuff, but that comes more clear as we go into the next bit that's going on with this point, is that the instant that projectile breaks the seal from the rifling, the gases that are forcing behind it are escaping. Then they travel, they are under pressure. You've got lots and lots of pressure still running into your muzzle. As you know, when you see blasts from with a little too much powder, you can see the explosion still coming out, so you see flame coming out the end there. If not, then if it's burned all thoroughly, then you still see the force of gas come out. And if you look at the slow speed footage of extremely high frames per second footage, you'll see that not only is there a little bit of gas in front of the projectile, so there's gas coming out in front of it as well. And the nature of that, for those people who don't understand, is when you fire a projectile, there's always a little tiny bit of gas that sneaks out and around the projectile and gets in front of it to go with the barrel full of air that's forced out in front of the bullet. So there's only a little tiny bit in front, but the main gas is stuck behind the projectile, and the moment it releases that muzzle, it squirts out. Exactly, squirts is probably an apt word for it, but it forces its way out and actually will overtake the bullet, but it actually is going everywhere. So it'll go out to the sides, it'll go out alongside, it'll go out and actually wrap around. Those gases and those pressures break past really quickly. They slow down fairly quickly because they are just air and gas and particles, whereas the projectile has the bit that is basically taken on the inertia side of things, so that's where most of the energy is going, but that gas is still escaping force that goes out and around. Now there's two main ingredients to that gas that's coming out. The first one is, as you can imagine now, if you've got all of a sudden gas squirting out the sides, if that doesn't happen dead evenly, it is also going to cause a force that is going to be less, or create less stability. Likely to push a little unevenly because the gas is coming out this side. If you have a little chip in your crown, if you have an unevenness, you have a worn patch in your crown, then that gas is going to be escaping first. So even though the majority of the gas is forcing evenly from behind, all of a sudden you've got an uneven pressure at the base of the bullet. Now this is where it goes into different style bullets, which is very relevant. And that is that there is, well, for the very simple crude side of it, you've got your flat blaze bullets and your boat tail bullets. With your boat tail bullet, we know that boat tail is so much better for external ballistics. So as it travels through the air, it's a lot better at traveling through the air, a lot more efficient traveling through the air. But a place that it's not as good at is this point of release of gas. The best way to do this actually, and this is old school target set of stuff and it's still used in the target ranges and that type of thing, is the cleaner and sharper you can make that break from the bullet to the barrel, the easier and cleaner the gas gets out, the less it affects the bullet through its travel. So a flat base bullet works better in that situation. So what we're actually talking about on that format there is that with a boat tail projectile, you then have this taper that is, it starts to get out a little tiny bit of gas, more gas, more gas, more gas. Now, obviously, this is all happening extremely high speed, but high speed is where all the stuff we're talking about bullets is at extremely high speed. So as far as it's concerned, it's a normal day in its life. There's a whole heap of time for that boat tail. The longer the boat tail, the more gradual the boat tail, the more this is gradual effect over the projectile. So I suppose that bit comes into, there's a couple of things. One, and I suppose I will dissect back to different crowns. And there are, I suppose, three main things that go into it. And it's largely about this part of that gas release of the projectile and the other main job of a crown. The crown on your rifle is really about trying to protect your rifle. So you have the classic old hunting crown, which is a very rounded crown. And they will come from full rounded, really generally running around a 45-degree crown to the actual barrel, and then the rounded out either side. That's the classic thing you'll see on most lever actions, you see in a lot of old muzzle loaders, you see in a lot of hunting rifles, a lot of modern hunting rifles as well. This is designed to give a decent, consistent release in the way of the fairly sharp edge down in that 45 degrees down inside there, which is actually the intersection between the barrel and the crown. And then the rest of it is designed so that if you accidentally lean it on the ground, whack it into the side of the car door, do whatever you want to do to it, is that rounded edge is strong because it's round. A sharp edge is an edge that will cut and crack and chip. A rounded edge is something that will generally just take it and put no more than a little ding in it, no matter what you hit with it. It isn't quite as strong as that, but that's the design of that rounded crown. A rebate crown is designed to try and give you a more accurate crown in the way of how the projectiles are released. And then the rebate is designed to where if you whack into something, it's all nice and protected. So that's the logic to go with a rebate crown. And then you go to a full target crown that is just straight out. That's what I generally use, but of course I'm using muzzle brakes, and this moves into a different part of the conversation as where we're going. There's flat crowns, there's full 45 degrees, there's just rounded crowns, which really is called sort of a standard crown, more of the type of thing on a classic hunting rifle. And I've done some images to go with those things, as you've seen. The truth of it is, all of them can work very well. They aren't specifically one better than the other, but generally a target crown, and the flatter and the smoother the crown is, generally the more accurate, and what you're going to find on most target rifles is where it goes. And that's largely about better bullets, or I should say more precision bullets. So generally boat tail bullets, and a full flat 11 degree target crown is what those two are really matched for and tend to work the best as. Some people are down at 7 degrees, some people are going to be at 13 degrees. There's other little variances of what guys will do, but 11 degrees would be sort of the industry standard. Listen, I mentioned that this gets a little more complicated at this point, and that is on that gas release, it isn't just the gas getting out that's the effect here. The other thing is the gas is going that quickly that it doesn't, as I said at the beginning of this, it doesn't just go out, it goes out and around, it goes everywhere. So there's a certain amount of gas that goes out and comes back in. Goes back and actually goes in and pushes on the front of the bullet. Now, this moves into a bit of a, listen, the science of this is not really science. It's more anecdotal / experience, and then what works and doesn't work out of experience. And we're moving into a muzzle brake territory and things as well. But to start off with, what we're talking about is that when you talk about the 11 degree crown coming out from here, we're trying to get that gas to go out and go away. So there is a theory that would go, the moment you go with a rebate crown, which is better for hunting, you've also then pushing some more gas back into your projectile, just on that release point. So as the projectiles just come out, the gas is sneaking out behind, it is then going at incredibly fast, 2 to 3 times the speed of the projectile, and I haven't seen proper speeds on it, but incredibly fast, even maybe faster than that. But some of that gas that's then come out from under the bottom of the bullet, it just releases, if you've got a rebate there, it's going to whack into the rebate and push more gas back into the projectile. Now, if this happens all dead evenly, it's really not an issue. It's just a little pressure wave it's going to go through, lots of other stuff going on, not going to affect it at all. But as you can imagine, if you have a piece of damage in that sort of crown, any crown, but even more so in a rebate crown, you have more gas coming out one side at that moment, or that one spot, hitting over here and then pushing into that side of the bullet. You're very much putting a extra, instability on your projectile. So you'll tend to find a group open up in those situations just out of that piece of that crown damage. And as for whether it's more or less than a normal target crown, I couldn't honestly say, but there's a decent theory, as you can imagine, with that banging back into it. And I mentioned this moves into muzzle brakes, and the reason it moves into muzzle brakes is that in an open barrel where you have no muzzle brake, just an open muzzle I should say, and you have whichever one of these crowns is, the gas is coming out and most of them are going away, but some are coming back in. So the release matters, the physical release of the projectile, the opening up of the gas port, so the gas pressure as it releases around, and then there's a certain amount coming back into it. In the right design sort of muzzle brake, those gases, they're going to actually go into a chamber that starts to impede the ability of that gas to get back in front of the bullet. It cuts it away because it's going in here, it's hitting, it might just at the first one be hitting this wall, but it's actually clearing it up. The actual baffles, the chambers of a muzzle brake, of a well-designed muzzle brake, are taking away that interference of that gas that's going in front. A poorly designed muzzle brake, on the other hand, if it has a chamber that's open with little holes in it that can actually create more turbulence, more gas bouncing around inside there, can actually cause a rifle to be less accurate. So it is, and I'll steer away from muzzle brakes. I've done a video on muzzle brakes and there's a fair bit involved with that, which is not pseudoscience, but getting down the road of where it's not fully explained, but that's some of the logic to go with it. Okay, well that's an overview on barrel crowns. They have two main jobs, as I've sort of been through. One is the release of that projectile. The other is protecting themselves. They all do good jobs, and looked after and set up properly, they all work well. Generally, a target crown or a 11-degree flat crown is 11-degree / flat crown, open crown, or muzzle brake, all the rest of it, much better for a target rifle and for better quality bullets. Boat tails, that sort of stuff, they work better. Not to say that there's not very high quality flat-based bullets, but I think you get where I'm heading. The hunting crowns still work very well. I've got some very accurate, everyone has got very accurate rifles with just classic old hunting crowns on them as well. And really comes down to the other details to go with it, but that's to explain a little bit more. Really, the video is to give you some idea of what we're actually talking about when we say the crown, how important it is. It is super important. Look after it. And I'll come back to things that I've mentioned about looking after crowns. Whenever you push something down it, be very careful. When you push something through and pull it back, be very careful. Yes, even clunking a bit of very soft brass or aluminium against the sharp edge of a target crown particularly, but something that's designed with more refined for the final levels of target shooting is very easy to damage. That metal is super hard, which also makes it super brittle, and a sharp edge means it's easy to damage. The likes of pull-throughs, something that the average quality gunsmith or guy who's been there enough, they sort of hate them, largely because of the amount of damage they've seen, especially old military rifles, but even hunting rifles now, where people pull something through, and without being careful about doing that, without tying to a tree and pulling dead straight, or doing all the normal bits and pieces, that causes wear. Yeah, even just rubbing a piece of nylon rope over the edge of something rather than pulling it where it's rubbing ends up causing damage. That's all about the carbon impregnated rope and that sort of stuff. But the thing is, it all comes back to, and I could probably go on for another half an hour on how not to damage your crown. Just don't damage your crown. Look after it. Make sure. Pay attention to it. It is very important. It is where accuracy lives. It's not that hard to fix, but you are going to be going to the gunsmith, and he's going to be chopping a bit off your barrel to sort it out once you've damaged it, to get it back to that accurate gun it used to be. Anyway, guys, that's my little jibber jabber on that one there. I hope you enjoyed the video. We'll catch you next time.